What is the most F-up way you got back at someone that wronged you? Story 1. Back in high school, I dated a girl for 6 months before she decided it wasn't working out anymore and cheated on me with about 6 guys. She also stole my iPhone and wallet to buy drugs. My parents encouraged me to report her to the police, but to stop me from doing so, her brother and his friends jumped me while I was walking home. They busted my lip pretty badly and threatened to harm me if I reported him or his sister. This happened in South Florida, so I believed he was serious. Not long after, my dad got a new job and we moved to a different city, but I was still upset about the situation, so I did the next best thing. I created 2 fake Facebook accounts, one of a random attractive girl and the other of a guy. I spent some time making them look legitimate, complete with friends and all, and added her brother using the girl's profile and my ex using the guy's. It didn't take long for him to start flirting with the fake girl, trying hard to impress her. On the other hand, I knew my ex well, so I knew exactly what to say to charm her, and she quickly fell for the fake guy. This is where it started to get interesting. I started a texting relationship between the brother and sister, with me acting as the middleman thanks to Google Voice. Since both of them had typical South Florida appearances, nothing seemed suspicious, and I photoshopped out any details in the backgrounds of the pictures that might give things away. This went on for about a month and a half, and I accumulated about 200 or so photos between the 2 of them. Then, I decided it was time to reveal the truth. I sent a group of unedited pictures that clearly showed their faces and rooms. Oh, how things escalated. I wish I could have seen their reactions in person. Friends who still lived in the area told me her brother moved in with his dad that week, and they no longer spoke to each other. All in all, it took about 4 months to get my revenge, but it was worth it. Story 2. A friend and I were fishing at a local creek when my friend's brother showed up. Being the jerk he normally was, he started throwing rocks in the creek to scare the fish and then tossed my friend's bike into the water. We were 13 at the time, and my friend was crying. I felt terrible. I jumped into the creek, pulled his bike out, and promised him we'd get his brother back. About a month later, we were fishing again, and it was the dead of summer. I told my friend that today was the day we'd get his brother. We caught a 2-3-pound carp, left it on the bank while we finished fishing, and then later we took the carp, sliced it open, and threw it under the driver's seat of his brother's car, rolling the windows up just enough. The next morning when we passed by his brother's car, we noticed the window was covered in flies. I actually got a bit scared because I didn't expect the flies. But by the time I got home, I was laughing so hard because his brother was always such a jerk to us. Fast forward to baseball practice a few days later. My friend had a black eye, but when we made eye contact, he smiled at me. Apparently, his brother had freaked out, punched him, and was grounded for the rest of the summer. His mom never suspected him and stood up for him, so he played along like nothing had happened. The smell, however, never really left the car. We started calling his brother Lord of the Flies. Story 3. Not me, but my brother. When my younger brother was about 3, my father had to watch him for the day. The plan was for my dad to take him to work, but my dad didn't want to deal with a toddler all day. So, he left him in the car with the radio on and a carton of apple juice. This is Britain, so overheating wasn't a concern, but it was still irresponsible. He expected to return to a sleeping child. Instead, when he came back, he found my brother jumping around the front seats, laughing and completely covered in poop. He had taken off his diaper, and the mess was smeared all over the car, on the steering wheel, the windscreen, the windows, even the ceiling. It was an absolute disaster. My dad couldn't believe how much of a mess one toddler could make. Story 4. I moved around a lot as a kid. My dad was in the army and my parents divorced, so I didn't stay in one place long enough to make lasting friendships. But my situation made me a prime target for bullies. At one school, a bully immediately singled me out. He shoved me around and made fun of my clothes. Nothing too extreme, but it made me feel miserable. One day, I went to the restroom and saw the bully as I passed by. He didn't bother me, but when I entered the bathroom, someone was in the only stall, making a mess. I left, disgusted, and headed back to my classroom. Then, I had an idea. I went straight to the bully's classroom, walked in, and told the teacher that he had made a mess in the bathroom. The teacher took him to the restroom where he kept insisting he hadn't done it, but she made him clean it up anyway. That was a turning point for me. It was the first time I'd stood up to a bully, and it gave me a new sense of confidence. Story 5. During the last year of my marriage, I spent a lot of time away for work, commuting 3-4 days a week. One night, while working remotely, I noticed my home network was unusually slow. After checking it out, I discovered that my wife was on a video chat with someone from out of state, a place where she had no family that I knew of. Curious, I started monitoring more closely. Over the next few weeks, I gathered more evidence from her IM conversations and other online activities. I also had security cameras installed at home because of neighborhood issues, and I eventually caught footage of a man coming and going from my house. He even drove my car at one point. I kept quiet, knowing she'd lie if I confronted her too soon. Then one day, the guy made a big mistake. He connected his laptop to my network. I'm a network engineer, so I knew how to track everything he did. I collected his usernames, passwords, and even intercepted his web traffic. It turned out he ran a popular gaming forum that was his main source of income. He thought it was secure, but I knew enough to exploit vulnerabilities. I didn't destroy the site, though. Instead, I started deleting random posts, and then older ones, systematically erasing months of content. Eventually, my wife's account was the only admin left, making it look like she was responsible. The guy freaked out and ended things with her. Meanwhile, I had all the evidence I needed to file for divorce. She never knew how much information I'd gathered. Story 6. I used to live in a very small town, around 250, 300 people. We had no stores, gas stations, or anything like that. One day, a local guy decided to open a little store that sold the basics, like groceries and rented movies. He hired a few of us high school kids to work for him over the summer, promising $50 a week, which he said would be paid at the end of the summer. We agreed and started working. We spent our summer stocking shelves, cleaning the bathroom, doing lawn care, and whatever else was needed. When the end of the summer came, on our last day of work, he came by with our paychecks. He gave each of us $50 for the entire summer. Needless to say, we weren't happy. His response was, "What are you going to do about it? Drop the key off at my house since you won't need it anymore." We came up with a plan to get back at him. Before locking up the store for the last time, we left a window unlocked. We dropped the key off at his house, and around midnight we went back to the store. We grabbed as much as we could: cigarettes, money from the register, candy. We probably took about $1,000 worth of stuff, locked the window, and left through the emergency exit, which had no alarm. There were no cameras either. The next day, there were cops at the store. He accused all of us of doing it, but he had no proof. A few months later, the store shut down because the town found out how he didn't pay us, and people stopped shopping there. I don't feel bad. He deserved it. Story 7. I worked at a place during college that served sandwiches and coffee. It was a nice place. Lots of people hung out there, and I liked everyone I worked with, except my boss, who was a total jerk. One week on payday, he gathered all the employees together and told us we wouldn't be getting paid that week and would have to wait until next week. We were okay with that, but when the next payday came, he still didn't have the money. This went on for about a month. We were all working under the table, and he told us that if we quit, we'd never get the money he owed us. We later found out he never intended to pay us and was spending all his money on bad habits. He stopped showing up for about 3 weeks, so the employees ran the store. In that time, we gave away practically everything for free. Anyone who came in got whatever they ordered, on the house. We even threw a party one night with an open mic and everything. When he finally showed up, he looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in a week. He freaked out, threatened to hurt us, and started throwing things. I was in the back and saw that his truck was double parked outside, so I called the campus towing company that was just a block away. While he was still freaking out, one of the employees said, "Hey, your truck's getting towed." He ran outside and watched as his Escalade got towed away. We all slipped out the back and never looked back. Story 8. When I was 13, I woke up in the middle of the night to find a man lying next to me in my small bed, staring right at me. I was confused and thought, "Oh, I must be having a nightmare." So I smiled at him, closed my eyes, and was about to fall back asleep when he started touching my leg. At that moment, I realized I was only in my underwear and that this was definitely not a dream. Fear took over, and I think I stopped breathing. He was trying to make his way to my underwear, and I knew I had to do something. So I said, "Hold on, I need to use the bathroom." He looked surprised but didn't stop me. I wrapped myself in a blanket and took a few steps toward the bathroom. That's when I noticed my bedroom door was wide open. I bolted. I ran to my mom's room, screaming that there was a man in my bed. She came out, ready to calm me down, thinking I'd had a bad dream, when the man ran out of my room and headed for the front door. My mom froze, but I was filled with a wave of anger. I grabbed a lamp, ripped it out of the wall, and started chasing him down the street, yelling and swinging the lamp. My mom called the police, and they caught him hiding in the bushes. When they brought him to me to identify, I walked right up to him, kneeled him where it hurt, and said, "Yes, I want to press charges." Story 9. My dad lived in an apartment building where each tenant had an assigned parking spot. He would often come home to find someone else parked in his spot. He'd ask the guy nicely several times to stop, and even talk to the landlords, but nothing changed. One day, he came home to find the guy's car in his spot again and decided he'd had enough. My dad had been working on cars since he was 13, so he knew what he was doing. He used a jack from his trunk to lift the guy's car off its rear tires, and since it was a rear-wheel drive, my dad now had full control of it. He moved the car across the lot and hid it behind a dumpster. Later that day, the guy showed up at my dad's door with a police officer. The officer asked what happened to the neighbor's car, and my dad calmly said, "He parked in my spot again, so I moved it behind the dumpster." To give you some context, my dad is 6'5" and used to be really muscular. He also has a fake eye that's too small, so he always looks kind of intense. The officer's eyes went wide when my dad pointed out the car through his window. He turned to the neighbor and said, "I recommend you never park in this man's spot again." And the guy never did. Story 10. When I was 15, my parents divorced. We lived on a farm, and I worked year-round to help pay for my motorcycle. I was also about 6'4" and 300 pounds, playing varsity football. I wasn't taking the divorce well, so I moved in with my mom, who had just gotten her own place. One day, I heard a commotion in the kitchen. When I walked in, I saw my mom's new boyfriend, Jim, hit her. She ran out of the house in fear. That moment filled me with more rage than I'd ever felt in my life. I confronted Jim, who was much smaller than me. He raised his hand like he was going to hit me, and that's when I snapped. The next thing I remember, I was sitting on his chest, punching him in the face, so hard his head bounced off the floor. When I finally stopped, I thought I might have killed him. I dragged him out to his truck, threw him into the bed, and tossed his belongings in with him. An hour later, I heard his truck start up and drive away. Years later, I saw him at a gas station. His face still showed signs of the trauma, and yes, I still feel terrible about it. Story 11. In 2009, I deployed for a 6-month tour to the Helmand province in Afghanistan. We ran at least weekly missions from Leatherneck to Nowzad. We were the only unit running that route. It was that bad. A month into the deployment, I was about 6 months into my first serious relationship. It was long distance since I was stationed in North Carolina, and she lived back home in New York. We were even planning on getting married, but my staff sergeant gave me some advice, and I decided it would be best to wait until after the deployment. Turns out, she had already been cheating on me just 4 months into the relationship. I took it really hard, and it was all I could think about for the next 6 months until I got back home. We had exchanged some belongings, but I never got any of my stuff back. One thing she had given me was a small dancer trinket to wear on my dog tags, which her mother had given to her before she ran off. About 5 months into my deployment, I found out that the guy she left me for, who was a level 3 offender, had gone back to prison for violating probation. Then I got a message from her on Facebook claiming she had just found out she was 6 months pregnant, and it was mine. There was no way she just found out she was 6 months pregnant, considering she weighed 110 pounds. It was a lie to try and get me back, but there was no pregnancy. 6 months later, I returned home. I walked into the subway where she worked. She started to greet me, but when she saw me, she froze mid-sentence, her face filled with horror. I walked up to the counter, looked her dead in the eyes, placed the dancer trinket on the counter, shook my head, and walked out. I heard her start crying before I even got to the door. These days, I'm more successful, out of the military with a great job, an amazing girlfriend, and a nice townhome. I never blocked her on Facebook, but I don't see her updates. Every so often she pokes me, but I never poke back. It's satisfying to know she can see me succeed without her while her life is a mess. About once a year, she messages me to say she regrets what she did, but I never respond. Story 12. I had a really loud neighbor in my apartment complex who was always causing problems. My wife had enough one night when he and his drunk friends were wrestling in the parking lot and making a ton of noise, so she called the cops. He was an angry drunk, and after the cops left, he retaliated by breaking the antenna off my car. I was furious. About a week later, he came home drunk again at 6 a.m., waking me up as he thundered up the stairs. A couple of hours later, we noticed he had left his keys in the door of his apartment. I quietly took them and chucked them into a ditch about a block away. The best part was hearing him tear his apartment apart, moving furniture and everything, trying to find his keys. His truck had 2 separate alarms, and after losing his remotes, he had to replace both. I regret nothing. Story 13. I went to school with a real jerk who bullied me a lot. Eventually, I had enough. One day in the library, I saw him log into his email. I managed to sneak a peek at his password. It was just his name and a number, not very smart. When I got home, I decided to take a look through his emails. I found an interesting conversation where his mother had convinced the government that he had a learning disability, so they could claim more money through social benefits. I forwarded the email archive along with his password to the proper authorities. I'm not sure if they could directly access his account, but a few weeks later, I heard his family was being taken to court and had to pay back all the extra money they had claimed under false pretenses. I graduated before the case was settled, but I know they had to pay back several $1,000s at the very least. Story 14. A few years ago, I read a story similar to mine, but I don't remember the details. Here's my version. I was dating a girl about 8 years ago, and she got pregnant. Unfortunately, she miscarried about a month in, and after that, I decided I wanted to get a vasectomy. We eventually split up, and a few years later, I was dating someone else for about 3 years when she got pregnant. I knew the baby wasn't mine because I had the vasectomy, and I wasn't foolish enough to go to some sketchy place for the procedure. So I was confident she had cheated on me. About 7 months into the pregnancy, she started acting really unpleasant, and we broke up. She then threatened to take me to court for child support. I told her she could try. Sure enough, I got a summons to court, where I demanded a paternity test. While we were waiting for the results, I informed her about my vasectomy. She stuck to her lie all the way through, but when the judge read out that I wasn't the father, the look on her face was priceless. Story 15. About 4 years ago, I found out my husband of 10 years had been cheating on me with a girl he went to high school with. He had always said he never dated her because, according to him, she had a reputation for not being faithful to just one guy at a time. At the time, I was a full-time student, and he was financially supporting us and our toddler. When I found out about the affair, I was understandably furious. He called me crazy and decided to leave me for her. I quit school for a year, worked 2 jobs, paid for the divorce, and supported our child on my own. I eventually went back to school, graduated with honors, landed my dream job, and have been doing great ever since. Meanwhile, he's been cheated on multiple times, lives in a rundown trailer park with his girlfriend, and his life is generally a mess. It's not exactly revenge, but it sure feels good. Story 16. When I was 7, the Monica Lewinsky scandal happened, and unfortunately, my name is Monica. You can imagine what a bunch of immature kids started calling me. There was one girl several years older than me who kept picking on me and calling me Monica Lewinsky. I asked her to stop, but she didn't. Keep in mind, this girl was much bigger than me. One day, she was on a jungle gym shaped like a fire engine, trying to balance herself. I saw an opportunity and started tickling her. When I realized she didn't like it and was losing her balance, I kept going. It was probably my innocent way of fighting back. Eventually, she lost her balance, fell, and broke her leg. Later on, when I saw her in a cast and on crutches, she gave me an apologetic look and never called me Monica Lewinsky again. From that point on, she seemed afraid of me, a little 7-year-old girl. Story 17. I have a plan I'm about to carry out in a few days. You see, my parents are difficult people. I've been taking care of them for a while now, while also going to school and managing other things, but they've been trying to cheat me and pawn my belongings. I've had enough. I'm currently out of town, but when I get back, the next time they ask me to walk 2 miles to buy them cigarettes, I'm going to act like I'm going to do it. I'll walk outside, around the house, and meet up with a friend who'll be waiting with a van. I've already packed my things, and I'll load them up from the basement entrance and leave. I'll stay at my friend's house for a few days, and then I have a train ticket to move 2,000 miles across the country. A friend there just got me a job, and I'll be out of my parents' lives. They can sit around waiting for their cigarettes, but I'll be gone, moving on with my life. Story 18. My best friend since I was 3 years old started texting, flirting, and eventually sleeping with my boyfriend of 7 years. Both of them were apologetic and begged for my forgiveness, claiming it was a mistake and wouldn't happen again. Until it did. My friend had been in an obsessive relationship with a guy named Billy, and when he found out about her infidelity, he was heartbroken and came to me. He felt like a loser, having lost both his girlfriend and his job, so I hired him at my job where I was a manager. We became good friends and my ex-best friend couldn't stand it. I started a rumor that Billy and I were dating and serious about it. One day, she saw us in a car together while I was giving him a ride home, and she completely lost it. She started driving like a maniac, sending me frantic texts asking, "How could you do this to me?" I ignored her. I dropped Billy off and unfortunately had to fire him later for stealing money from work. In the end, I got my revenge. I messed with her head and my exes, but I never actually did anything wrong. They both thought I did, though, and I'm okay with that. Story 19. The best revenge is served cold. About 11 years ago, I was working almost nonstop, trying to deal with several deaths in my family over a few weeks, and struggling to keep everything together. My now ex decided she wasn't getting enough attention and started cheating on me during business trips. Eventually, I caught her. I recorded a phone conversation she had with a friend where she bragged about having a great time with some guys in Florida. She couldn't deny it after that, so I decided to go with the truth. I left. I found a new place to live and began sharing a few documented facts about her behavior. Not rumors, just the truth. She had been mishandling funds at work, which included corporate, state, and federal money. She was also underreporting her consulting income on her taxes. I made a few calls to the relevant authorities. Additionally, she had plagiarized material in some of her publications. I informed the editors, which effectively ended her academic career. When it came time for her to pay me my share of the equity from our house, she claimed she was broke, then showed up to work in a new Corvette. A few months later, she moved to California and refused to pay her share. I got her new address from the mortgage company with some explaining and had my lawyer go after her. Within a week, I had a check in hand. Meanwhile, she was broke, discredited, and dealing with the IRS. End result. Her academic career ended, and now, 10 years later, she's just managing a research institute with no real respect or credibility. Sometimes, simply telling the truth is the best revenge. Story 21. When I was around 13 or 14, I used to hang out with my 21-year-old neighbors. I didn't realize at the time that these guys would constantly convince me to do dumb things and then leave me to face the consequences. This went on until I was about 17 when I finally figured out what was happening. I was furious and wanted revenge, but by the time I came up with a plan, they had moved away. I decided to get back at them anyway. These guys were serious party people and always had gatherings. Once, I went to one of their parties and quietly stayed in the back. I had 5 cartons of heavy whipping cream that I had bought 6 months earlier, which I had kept in the fridge until that day. I took each carton and poured one into the air vents of their house. I had 1 carton left, so I poured it into the AC unit. Not sure if that did anything. The smell was so rancid that it almost made me sick. A few weeks later, the house went up for sale, but no one wanted to buy it, supposedly because of the smell. They eventually gave up on selling it and even tried burning it down. After an investigation, the oldest brother was arrested for fraud and served a year in prison. I haven't heard anything about them since. Story 22. I was dating this girl who was gorgeous. And let's just say, she had some assets that kept me thinking about her a lot. My brother clued me in that she was cheating on me, but I didn't believe him at first. Finally, he forced me to get in his car and follow her from work, where we watched her go straight to her ex-boyfriend's house. Turns out, she was also cheating on me with my best friend at the time. I had recently turned down a great girl I met in Europe for this one, so I was devastated. I got tested for STDs and thankfully came out clean, but it was a stressful wait. While I was plotting my revenge, an opportunity arose. One day, she wanted to get intimate, but I had no interest due to the cheating. She tried to give me one of her signature special favors, but I really needed to use the bathroom. Fueled by anger, I managed to do something that's usually difficult: pee while aroused. As she got more involved, I pretended to be finishing and then let go. The results were almost comical. Her cheeks puffed out as she tried to deal with the unexpected flood. Instinctively, she stayed on for most of it, but then ran to the sink to spit it out. As she figured out what happened, I refused to kiss her, thinking to myself, sometimes the best revenge plans aren't planned at all. Story 23. Before my senior year of high school, I was deeply religious and wanted to make friends with others who shared my beliefs. I joined a local congregation and got involved with their youth group. That summer, they invited me to a camp in Louisiana. Most of the camp was white, and aside from 2 others, I was the only Hispanic person. Fitting in was difficult, and I was new to the church, so I felt out of place. One guy, nicknamed Milky because of how pale he was, immediately rubbed me the wrong way. He was loud and annoying. Towards the end of the camp, I was sitting in a bathroom stall when I heard Milky outside, goofing around. He threw something that hit me on the head, and I was furious. When I got out, I found out he was bragging about it. So I planned my revenge. I gathered some lotions and shampoos to make a creamy mixture and hid in the showers. When he walked in, still boasting, I ran out and slapped him across the face with the mixture. The slap was loud and the room fell silent. He touched his face in horror, thinking it was something much worse. I laughed and mimicked the gesture of you-know-what, and everyone started chanting, "Milky got milked!" The next day, I found out he had spent the entire night scrubbing his face, even using bleach. Needless to say, I didn't go back to that camp, but I left satisfied. Story 24. When I was in my early 20s, I worked as a delivery driver for the only pizza place in a small town. I would zip through traffic, sometimes being a nuisance to other drivers. One day, I was going downhill, and the car in front of me started to turn into their driveway. I tried to pass them in the oncoming lane, but the driver pulled back into the road to block me. I slammed on my brakes, and the driver got out, yelling at me about crossing the double yellow line. In my state, it wasn't illegal, so I calmly told him he was wrong and asked him to move his car. He kept shouting at me, calling me names. Eventually, I drove around him and finished my deliveries. Later that night, after having a few drinks, I decided he needed some payback. I drove to his house, found a brick, and threw it through both his back and side windows. Then I drove off as fast as I could, hoping I hadn't been seen. For years, I didn't think much of it, but I eventually realized I had been in the wrong. One day, I got a delivery order for the same address I had vandalized. I feared the worst, but when I rang the doorbell, the man answered in a wheelchair. He didn't recognize me and even tipped me $5. That night, a wave of guilt hit me. I took his receipt, scratched out the tip, and only charged him for the meal. For the next year, he ordered pizza almost daily, and each time I would scratch off his $5 tip. By the time he stopped ordering, I had erased around $900 in tips. Story 25. I have cerebral palsy, and as a result, I was picked on during grade school. Between kindergarten and 6th grade, I had to change schools 3 times because of kids pushing me into walls, beating me up, and bullying me. At the time, I had to use a walker to get around. When I was in 5th grade at my new school, there was this one kid who made my life miserable every day. He must have been about 200 pounds and loved to torment me. On my 3rd day there, he pushed me down a flight of stairs that led into the gym. I ended up in the ER with a dislocated shoulder. Fast forward 3 months, and this same kid was standing by the boys' bathroom door, talking to his friends. He made a comment that I'd never have a girlfriend because of the way I walked. I wasn't a violent kid, but that day, something in me snapped. I got as close as I could before he noticed me. Without a word, I swung my walker like a baseball bat and hit him square in the nose. Since my balance was bad, I fell into him as well. As we both fell toward the bathroom door, another kid opened it, and the doorknob hit him in the back of the head and neck. It ended up cracking a vertebra in his neck, and it paralyzed his right arm and hand. After that day, I wasn't picked on anymore, but kids started calling me Crazy Duck. Story 26. I used to work in a toxic environment, led by a terrible manager. He made life miserable for everyone around him, and eventually, a number of us quit and sued him, settling out of court. He was eventually forced to retire, but that's not where the revenge lies. I worked in IT in a senior management position, so I wasn't a tech. But one day, this manager walked by my desk, threw his BlackBerry at me, and told me to fix it. After spending time on the phone with the wireless carrier and checking his user settings, I discovered he had chosen to save every outgoing email on his device. His account was full, which is why it had stopped working. As I looked through his account to find the issue, I discovered emails revealing that this married father of 2 was having an affair with another man. I was shocked but decided not to do anything with this information. I realized that if I exposed him, he might eventually find freedom and happiness, living the life he truly wanted. By keeping quiet, I trapped him in his own misery, continuing to live the lie that had made him such a bully in the first place. He remained in his own mental prison, and I realized that sometimes saying nothing is the best revenge. Story 27. I started hanging out with a guy from my college class since we lived close to each other. One day, he mentioned me to his girlfriend, and it turns out she and I went to the same school from kindergarten through 3rd grade. I remembered her well. She was terrible to me back then, dumping juice on my head, chasing me, and spreading rumors that I was homeless. When I asked him what she had said about me, he hesitated before telling me that she had warned him not to hang out with me, saying I was creepy. That was it for me. They had been dating for about 3 years, and I decided to get back at her. I seduced him. After we hooked up one afternoon, he fell asleep, so I took a picture with his phone of me sitting next to him, smiling and giving a thumbs up. I sent the picture to her with a message along the lines of, "Greetings from me." Then I left and never saw him again. Story 28. In college, there was this house on our street that was known for its loud parties. It was typical bro house behavior, beer cans and solo cups littering the yard and loud music all the time. The guys at the house had made an illegal parking spot by moving some curb slabs under a tree, and they'd parked there to avoid street parking. One night, I parked my car in front of the house, not realizing it was their makeshift parking spot. The next morning, I woke up to find my car keyed on both sides, with a giant smiley face scratched into the hood. A week later, the same thing happened to a PT Cruiser parked in the same spot. Fast forward 2 months, and we were moving to a new place. I decided to get my revenge. One night, I threw a cinder block through their window. It smashed right into the bass guitar they had sitting inside, breaking the neck in half. I bolted out of there and told my roommates about it a month later. Story 29. When I was 17, my mom had a house built by a private contractor. This guy was an angry, manipulative person, and he ripped her off for $400,000, doing terrible work on the house. He bribed the county inspector to pass the house, and it ended up costing her another $100,000 to fix his mistakes. He did this to several other people as well, taking advantage of her because she was a single woman. I told my mom I could take care of him in a more permanent way, but she wasn't fond of that idea. Instead, I made a fake Facebook account and messaged his wife, telling her that he had been having an affair with me. 2 weeks later, she packed up her things, took the kids, and moved across the country to live with her parents. He's now being sued by 6 other people and is millions of dollars in debt because his wife was financing his business, and now she's gone. Story 30. First of all, this post makes me feel super old because you had an iPhone in high school, and I rocked a Motorola StarTAC and thought I was the coolest. Anyway, my story isn't that bad, but it felt really good. I was kind of a nerdy girl. I liked video games, I was in band, and around 8th grade, I went from being tall and lanky to, well, quite pretty. I didn't really notice, but apparently the boys did. There was a new girl who came to our school that year, and I tried to befriend her since I knew what it was like to be the new kid. Everything was fine for a few weeks, but then she got a crush on a boy, and that boy told her he had always wanted to date me. I wasn't interested in the boy at all, because he did drugs and beat people up, which has never been attractive to me. Fast forward to me in the bathroom, washing my hands before lunch, and she pushes me up against the paper towel dispenser, threatening to beat me up if I ever went near her man. We were in 8th grade, so it was pretty dramatic. I went straight to the principal and told them she was scaring me, and I didn't even know she had a boyfriend. She got in trouble, got angrier, and tried to fight me again. This time, my mom got involved, and it escalated until she was expelled. On my first day of high school, she saw me and spat on my shoes, telling me I'd better run. So I ran for my life and jumped into my mom's car, yelling, "Drive, drive, drive." After that, the high school principal must have stepped in because the harassment stopped. 8 years later, I was managing a major staffing company in our town. She came in and interviewed with me for a job. Needless to say, she never got the job or any job from my company. Not the most exciting revenge, but it felt really good. Story 31. I had a roommate in college for a couple of years, and he was one of the worst people I've ever met. He didn't shower, never washed his clothes, and I found out he didn't even own a toothbrush for the 2 years we lived together. He failed his classes, didn't have a job, but always claimed he was smarter than everyone else. He ate my food, threw tantrums if I watched something he didn't like on the TV that I paid for, and kept piling up debts to me. I put up with it for too long thinking I was being nice, but eventually I snapped. He owed me a lot of money and hadn't paid rent for months, using his mom being sick as an excuse. I decided I had to get back at him. I started playing music really loudly when he and his girlfriend had important things to do in the morning. One time, she threw chairs at me and threatened to kill me. That only encouraged me more. I began waking him up in the middle of the night, reciting Bible verses or reading from the Lord of the Rings. I'd hide around the apartment to jump out and scare him, acting insane and daring him to hit me. He was so confused and scared, I got him to pay me back all the money he owed, but I didn't stop. I tracked him on message boards and sent weird song lyrics or cryptic messages. I even followed him into a bar bathroom once, put my hands on his shoulders as he was peeing, and told him I had spies everywhere. He ended up abandoning the apartment and moving in with his girlfriend, but kept paying rent until the lease was up. To this day, he still thinks I'm stalking him, and whenever I see him around town, he runs away. It's been 3 years, and I don't regret it. I'm just amazed at how good I was at torturing him. Story 32. One of my relatives had died tragically that year, and my dad had gone through several life-threatening operations that left him in a wheelchair for 6 months. The stress of all this and having to support my mom caused me to fall behind in school, and I had to go back a year. I didn't tell anyone the reasons for my delay because I don't like airing my struggles in public, though some people knew about my dad's condition. One guy, Matt, wouldn't stop making jokes about me repeating the year. For 2 years, he constantly insulted me, calling me names like the geriatric student and implying I was slow. It was relentless. One day, he left his school computer account open. He had been working on assignments that accounted for a big part of his overall grades. His English work, drama coursework, and other projects were all there. I thought about messing with him a bit, maybe putting a silly picture in his files. But then I decided to do something bigger. I deleted everything, his schoolwork, emails, and personal files. My entire physics class watched me do it, and no one stopped me. Even the teacher saw what was happening and didn't interfere. Matt had no idea who did it, and no one ever told him. He blamed it, but they couldn't recover his files because I had been thorough. He had to scramble to redo everything before the deadlines. And for the first time in years, I got some peace. 6 months later, Matt got terrible grades and didn't get into the university he wanted. He had to settle for a subpar college. I don't know how much I contributed to that, but I like to think I had a part in it. He was a jerk, and while what I did was wrong, I don't regret it. Eventually, I learned that he had a tough childhood, too. His mom died when he was young, and his dad wasn't really there for him. It explained some of his behavior, and though he was still an annoyance, I understood him better. Maybe one day, I'll buy him a drink and confess that I was the one who deleted his work. Story 33. I worked for T-Mobile as an event rep, setting up activation events at big box stores. My favorite manager's boyfriend offered me a job at a T-Mobile exclusive dealer. At first, things went well, but then he started interfering with my sales and taking my customers for himself. He was the manager, so there wasn't much I could do. He'd pull shady moves, like upgrading one customer's line but taking credits from others and selling the extra phones as prepaid. He even reported phones as lost or stolen to activate new lines, all to boost his sales numbers. I found out he had a MySpace account that his girlfriend, my friend from T-Mobile, didn't know about, and he was cheating on her regularly. He dug himself deeper when he sold $3,000 worth of free phones using a stolen tax ID. His scams eventually caught up to him. I reported everything to my contacts at T-Mobile Corporate, providing account details and evidence of fraud. The entire store went under investigation, and the company running the franchise went out of business. But that wasn't enough for me. I told my friend about his secret MySpace account. She dumped him, and his ownership and job were destroyed. Meanwhile, I got a new job and performed at the top of my district. In the end, I brought him down, and I have no regrets. Story 34. One of my roommates during my junior year took a girl he was friends with on a date. He creeped her out since he was absolutely unhinged. He was later institutionalized, and she refused to go on a second date. He had a few of her belongings, CDs and DVDs, and was holding them hostage until she agreed to see him again. She asked me on campus if I could help her get them back, since he was being a jerk. I agreed, not just because of that, but also because he'd been using my computer for things he shouldn't have, causing all sorts of trouble with the neighbors, and generally being a menace. I asked him nicely to return her stuff, but he refused, so I just took it and returned it to her. She was watching Mallrats with her friends in her dorm, and I ended up watching the rest of the movie with them. When I got back, he confronted me angrily. I had broken my arm a day earlier, so I wasn't at full strength, but a few weeks later, the girl asked me to hang out again. I said yes, of course. When I got back that time, my roommate attacked me. I managed to fight back, but he seriously messed up my arm and my face was a wreck. When my arm was finally casted during finals week, I returned to the apartment with the girl. He was using my computer to finish a final paper, so we locked him out of the room when he took a break. And well, let's say we made sure he heard us while we were at it. When we finally came out, I nodded at him as we left for food. But that's not the real revenge. The real revenge is that I married her 5 years later. And last month, we welcomed beautiful twin boys into the world. Story 35. This is kind of silly, but I had a friend whose girlfriend was incredibly insecure and jealous. She demanded that he stop hanging out with me and other friends he had known for years, long before she came into the picture. For the record, you can like someone's humor without wanting to date them. Eventually, I got tired of her antics and decided to mess with her insecurities. I flirted with her boyfriend at parties, dropped hints that we'd been together before, just petty, catty stuff. It drove her absolutely wild to the point where she tried to control his every move. It didn't take long before he realized how miserable he was and broke up with her. Unfortunately, we drifted apart after that, but I like to think I did him a favor by helping him see how controlling she was. Story 36. It was the late 90s, and I was in high school. Like many teens back then, I was into drugs, and so was the girl I was dating. One weekend, I went camping, and when I came back, my pager, yes, pager, was blowing up with messages from my girlfriend. When I got to her place, I found her in the back seat of my friend's car, beaten and bruised. Apparently at a party, she got into an argument with a guy about weed prices. He claimed to be some kind of gang member and didn't like that a girl was challenging him, so he grabbed her by the hair and started smashing her face into things. My so-called friends just stood by and did nothing. After making her comfortable at home, I told her I had to run an errand and left. My real friends and I planned retaliation. We didn't use guns, but we geared up with masks and bats, ready to confront them at the party house. We were about to make our move when an elderly couple spotted us. The partygoers saw us too, freaked out, and called the cops. We had to retreat before anything could happen. A year later, I heard that the guy who attacked my girlfriend had been killed in a different incident. It felt like karma. Then one of his friends made a joke about how the beating was funny. That's when my rage kicked in. Instead of going after him physically, I befriended him. Within weeks, I got him hooked on meth. His life quickly spiraled out of control. He lost everything. For years, he went in and out of rehab, jail, and homelessness. Once, while he was in rehab, I visited him. After a while, I offered him some meth, and he took it. As we walked back to check him in, I whispered in his ear, "Never mess with me or my girl again." I told the staff he had drugs on him, and he was restrained and sent off to prison since it was his last chance at rehab. Story 37. Back in high school, I did something bad. I stole a friend's girlfriend. I didn't know anything about dating etiquette at the time. They had broken up over a month ago, but I was more interested in the fact that she wanted to hang out with me. Being 16 and thinking, yay, attention. I didn't think about the consequences. My friend Bob didn't take it well. He started threatening me, and his friends would mess with me, closing my locker or messing with my food. I ignored it until they started targeting my parents' car. They poured garbage on it, egged it, and even smeared motor oil on the windshield. Eventually, I couldn't hide it from my parents anymore. I told some of my more intimidating friends about it, and one day they told me, "Don't worry about it anymore." A week later, Bob's car was found stripped down to the frame on the school steps. I felt bad about it, but the harassment stopped after that. I hope Bob moved on and found better friends. Story 38. The most messed up thing I've ever done is actually happening in a couple of hours. My girlfriend of 2 years has been seeing another guy for the past 2 weeks. We just started going to different colleges, and she's been sneaking around. In a couple of hours, I'm going to drive to her house, gather up all the things I ever bought her, and take her to the beach down the street. I'm going to put everything in a fire pit, light a cigarette, take a long drag, and flick it into the fire. Then I'll toss the jewelry into the water and leave. Afterward, I'm going to grab coffee with the guy she cheated with, tell him how disappointed I am, give him the evidence, and wish him luck. I'll post about the whole thing on Facebook, let everyone know I'm open to meeting new people, and then go pick up my paycheck. Living well is the best revenge, right? Story 39. Some of my high school friends like to toilet paper people's houses. I never joined them because when I was younger, my house got TP'd, and it took hours to clean up, especially after it rained and turned the TP into a gross mess. One weekend, they decided to TP my house, thinking it would be funny. I wanted revenge, but didn't feel like TPing their houses in return. It wasn't creative enough. Instead, I came up with something better and recruited my parents to help. My mom had once broken her knee falling off a counter, which my friends knew about. So on Monday, I acted angry and told them I wasn't upset about the TP, but about my mom falling off a ladder while trying to clean it up. I walked away, leaving them shocked. By the end of the week, they gave me a card they had made for my mom, apologizing for what happened. I didn't tell them the truth until 3 years later, and apparently, they spent all that time thinking my mom hated them. Story 40. When I was in grad school, I lived in an apartment complex just off campus. I had a 2-bedroom apartment with a large living area, which was great for hosting gatherings. Unfortunately, whenever I received deliveries, the UPS or FedEx drivers would leave valuable packages outside my screen door, even though I asked them to leave them inside the building. I was planning a trip with my girlfriend, so I asked my neighbor across the hall to bring in any packages for me while I was gone. They agreed, and I left them a spare key. When I returned, I was greeted by a disaster. My apartment was trashed. There was dog mess everywhere, and it looked like someone had thrown a wild party. My neighbors denied any involvement, but another neighbor mentioned they had seen my neighbors partying in my apartment for 2 nights in a row. These guys were hipster types, so I decided to get creative with my revenge. I went to a craft store and bought some candle-making supplies. I picked up the dog mess, still fresh and disgusting, with a shovel, mixed it with lighter fluid and pectin to keep it from drying, and molded it around some M80S. I wrapped the explosives in the mixture and used candle wax to cover everything, making it look like a normal lavender-scented candle. I sent the candle to my neighbors, disguised as a gift from a local bank. Knowing they loved candles and incense, I was sure they'd light it. A few weeks later, while hanging out with friends, we heard a loud explosion. We rushed over, pretending to check on them, and found their apartment covered in the mess. It was everywhere, on the walls, ceiling fan, AC unit, and even on their food. One of my buddies asked, "What happened?" The neighbor replied, "I don't know, but this candle from the bank just exploded." My friend joked, "It smells like something bad happened." We chuckled and left. Story 41. At my small high school, homecoming week was always junior-senior war week, where students pulled harmless pranks on each other. But my senior year, things escalated quickly. People were slashing tires, breaking windows, and doing other dangerous stuff. My group of friends kept things lighthearted. We rolled a few houses, including one particular guy's house, who was a known jerk. The next day, he was furious about having to clean up all the toilet paper, and I laughed at his frustration. Big mistake. The next morning, I woke up to find my dog had died. I was devastated. At school, that same guy was bragging about how he'd poisoned my dog by putting antifreeze in its water bowl. I went straight to the principal, who called the police, and he was arrested. He ended up being sent to a juvenile facility. Years later, I returned to my hometown and saw him working at a local Walmart, looking miserable and alone. When I laughed at his misfortune, he punched me, which got him fired from his job. Last I heard, he's still struggling, and honestly, I'm glad. He deserved it for what he did. Story 42. When I was a child, my cousin molested me. It was a horrible experience, and the aftermath was even worse. His side of the family called me names and made me feel like I was the one at fault. He only served a year in a cushy institution, but I wanted justice. Fast forward to his senior year of high school. My godmother, who lived in the same town, found out he was returning to school without the administration alerting parents. She started handing out flyers in the school parking lot to warn people. At the time, my cousin was dating a girl who had no idea about his past. My godmother tried to give him a chance to tell her himself, but he refused and even said awful things about me, so my godmother decided to take action. She visited the girl's parents, who were her friends, and showed them court papers proving what had happened. The girl was furious and horrified when she found out. The next day at school, she publicly confronted my cousin in front of everyone, yelling at him and revealing what he had done. The entire student body heard her. My cousin was so humiliated that he ended up dropping out. He later tried to join the military, but they rejected him because of his juvenile record. I'm forever grateful to that girl for standing up to him. She gave him exactly what he deserved. Story 43. I worked with a coworker I didn't get along with, a petty, constant rivalry. She had seniority over me and often took the overtime shifts, but then I received a temporary promotion to manager, which came with a pay bump. One week, my normal duties and my manager duties overlapped for an hour, meaning I earned double overtime for that period. It was a simple mistake, but I wasn't going to say anything about it. Unfortunately, she noticed and reported me to the union. As a result, I lost both shifts, and she picked up one of them for overtime. I was furious, so I decided to play the long game for revenge. I started by changing my attitude toward her, offering compliments and making small talk. Over the months, I built a friendship with her, getting closer and closer. She had a long-term boyfriend, but eventually we started flirting, and things got personal. After 2 years of building this friendship, I convinced her to break up with her boyfriend. That night, I went over to her place and things escalated quickly. When it was over, I casually remarked, "Most expensive moment ever." She looked confused, and I waited as she put the pieces together. Her face changed as she realized what I'd done. I laughed, got dressed, and left. We never spoke again, and I didn't regret a thing. Story 44. There was this kid in elementary school who bullied me constantly. It started with verbal abuse and stealing things like my milk carton, which I loved, and it was devastating each time. By 5th grade, he started getting physical. One day, while I was at my locker with a friend, he grabbed my head and slammed it into the locker. I collapsed, crying, and everyone laughed. That moment left a lasting mark, both figuratively and literally. A couple of days later, I called the school and reported that the bully had threatened to bring his father's gun to school and hurt me and another emotional kid. I guessed his father might own a gun, and to my surprise, the police raided his house and found a replica gun. Even though he tried to deny the accusations, they took it seriously. He was forced to make a public apology in front of me and everyone. Seeing him cry and apologize was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. He left school shortly after, became an outcast, and eventually attended a vocational school. I've heard he suffered from severe depression and struggled ever since. Looking back, I feel bad about how much I impacted his life at such a young age. But he was heading down a troubled path anyway. Story 45. In 9th grade, during a PE class, I was forced to play flag football. I didn't like it and was a big kid, so I knew I could accidentally hurt someone easily. One day, while I was getting ready in position, a kid came up behind me and kicked me in the groin for fun. I collapsed in pain while others laughed or cringed. This wasn't the first time he had picked on me, but it was one of the worst. Fast forward a few months, and we're playing basketball during break. I got shoved trying to catch a rebound, and my elbow accidentally hit a friend's mouth. My friend tried to fight me, thinking it was intentional, but we eventually stopped talking for 6 months. The same bully who kicked me was there, laughing and taunting me again. A week later, I finally called him out, and we fought. He bloodied me up pretty bad because he knew how to box, and I didn't. 4 years later, after high school, we ended up working at the same decking mill. He had some run-ins with the law and was due in court to find out if he had to serve time. On the day of his court appearance, I parked the forklift outside the door to lock him in, making him miss his hearing. When he finally got out, he was crying because he had to serve his 6-month sentence. I asked him if he remembered kicking me in PE, and he said yes. I told him I was the one who parked the forklift. Surprisingly, after he got out, he apologized for all the bullying and told me he had just been seeking attention. We've been friends ever since, and he really mellowed out after his time in jail. Story 46. This is a story about my mother. When I was a child, I was very sick, and my mom was the one who took care of me since we were on welfare. My dad was around, but my mom pushed him away. She also had a long-term affair with his best friend, but no one knew at the time. To justify divorcing my dad, she started making up stories about him being abusive. Eventually, she believed the lies herself, and everyone around her started believing them too. After the divorce, they shared custody of me and my sister, but my mom refused to let my dad see us, claiming he wasn't trustworthy. My dad gave up trying to fight, and I didn't see him for 10 years. During that time, my mom constantly told me how terrible my dad was, that he was a bad person who had done awful things. I believed her. Things got worse when my mom had an accident and lost her leg. She became incredibly controlling, and by the time I was 14, she made me pay rent to live at home. She was also dealing drugs and using them heavily. She wouldn't feed me because I looked like my dad, and she barely fed my younger siblings. Life was tough, and I eventually had to resort to dealing drugs myself just to survive. One day I saw my cousin driving by, and I mentioned it to my mom. She called the police, telling them he had tried to run me over, and then threatened to turn me in for drug dealing if I didn't back up her story in court. Scared, I agreed. Luckily, there was a camera that cleared my cousin, and I avoided getting into trouble. When I turned 18, I moved out, but my mom called the police, accusing me of stealing from her and assaulting her. After 2 years of her causing chaos, I finally had enough. I got back at her by slashing her tires, siphoning the gas from her truck, and breaking the windows of both her and my stepdad's vehicles. Then I moved to Virginia to start fresh. Story 48. When I was in 6th grade, my family evacuated to Texas due to Hurricane Katrina, and I started attending school there. The bus I rode to school in Houston was always packed. On my first day, I noticed everyone giving me looks of pity as I walked in. One kid offered me a seat, even though the spot was already crowded, but I kept walking and sat in the back where there was an empty seat. After a few moments, I realized why the seat was empty. The bullies of the school sat in the back, and as a new 6th grader, I was an easy target. They started making rude and racist remarks because of my background. I'm Asian. I stayed quiet, just trying to get through the ride. The next day, I sat in the same seat again, determined not to let them scare me off. One day, the leader of the group made a really offensive comment, and I'd had enough. I shot back a sarcastic comment that caught him off guard. When I got to my stop, I realized they had followed the bus, waiting to confront me. It was 6 of them, and while I was scared, I stayed calm and walked toward my house. As I was about to go inside, the leader of the group made one more rude comment that set me off. I turned around, ran toward him, and punched him right in the face. I kept going, not stopping until he was on the ground. Before I left, I gave him a final kick in the leg, which ended up breaking it. The rest of the group quickly ran off, leaving him behind. The next day, when I got on the bus, the whole bus erupted in applause. Being the new kid, it felt pretty amazing to get that kind of recognition. Later, I was called into the principal's office to explain what had happened. I told them how I was verbally harassed and acted in self-defense when they tried to confront me. The school punished the bullies by making them sit at the front of the bus from then on. Later that day, the bully and one of his friends came to my door to apologize. He couldn't even make eye contact with me. His leg was in a cast, and he had walked all the way to my house to apologize for what he'd done. Story 49. My high school golf coach was notorious for being difficult. He wasn't a great golfer, but he loved the students who kissed up to him. For whatever reason, he had it out for me from the start. I thought I was done with him after moving up to the varsity team, but he was promoted to varsity coach at the same time. Senior year, despite consistently performing well in tryouts, he cut me from the team. He had no problem keeping his favorites, even though they performed worse than I did. I dealt with this unfair treatment all through high school, and when I graduated, I thought I had left it behind. During college, I started making money as a Little League baseball umpire, where I worked competitive travel league games. These were challenging, but they paid well. One day, while umpiring a game, I noticed my old coach on the sidelines. It turns out his son was on one of the teams. I hadn't realized he had a kid that age, but I remembered some rumors about him from high school, including one involving a student, which explained a lot. From that moment on, I decided to make his son's baseball career difficult. Every time his son came up to bat, I widened the strike zone, making it almost impossible for him to succeed. When he pitched, I made sure none of his borderline throws were called strikes, forcing him to throw right down the middle, where he'd get hit hard by the batters. This went on for a while, and his performance suffered. Eventually, the coach realized what I was doing, but by then, the damage had been done. His son's confidence was shattered. Even when I wasn't umpiring, I noticed his performance had declined. He started swinging at bad pitches, trying too hard to compensate for his struggles. Over time, he slipped further down the lineup and was eventually relegated to a backup role. I don't feel too bad about what I did. His son, like his father, treated others poorly. In the end, I like to think I gave him a taste of what it's like to be on the receiving end of unfair treatment.